Welcome back to the Ross Bolen podcast. I am your host, Ross Bolen, and today I am working without Jared or Cade. Actually had to call in a ringer. Producer Mike Moody to come through and produce this episode for me. Shout out to Mike Moody. Those of you who have been longtime RBP listeners are very aware of Mike, who produced many, many episodes of this show between the end of my former employer being where RBP was hosted into the Bolen Media era out of Permanent Record Studios here in Austin, Texas. Mike was kind enough to be here with me at Bolen Media headquarters today in exchange for money, of course. I'm not holding him at gunpoint. I pay him for his services. But yeah, all kinds of chaos down here this past few weeks between me moving and vacation time and personal stuff cropping up for the whole squad all at once. Again, we are a very small media business running several brands and podcasts out of Austin, Texas, with only 3 full-time employees between myself, Mr. Jared Borslow, and Cade Orris. So we appreciate y'all. Thank you very much for bearing with us and for your patience. Regardless, I am here today with a special episode for you, but before we get to why it's special, I want to reiterate my stance on something, all right? I'm just going to call it's an epidemic at this point. It's the subtitle epidemic. And I've been bitching and moaning about subtitles for a while, but they've become an enormous problem with television and movie watching. They were a problem before the pandemic, but with everyone being stuck at home the last few years way more often than usual, the problem has turned into an epidemic of its own, a subtitle epidemic. And a charity called Stage Text recently released a survey that says 4 out of 5 adults age 18 to 25 use subtitles while watching TV or streaming their favorite show. 4 out of 5 adults 18 to 25, anything they're watching with subtitles. So it's no longer just the olds, okay? I thought this was more of a boomer issue, and I'll throw myself in under that boomer bus. I'm one of them, all right? I thought this was a people over 25 years old issue, a people over 35, if I was being honest. I thought it was the olds. It turns out it's the youths as well. We've all been infected by the subtitles because, bro, back in the day, like 10 years ago, if you were watching TV with subtitles on, it's because you were getting your fucking oil changed, and that's what they have going in there. There's no sound, so they put on the subtitles. Or you were hearing impaired. Now it's everybody, and it doesn't make any sense. 4 out of 5 adults, ages 18 to 25, are reading TV instead of watching it. That is absolutely mind-blowing to me. Look, let me put this as simply as I possibly can. This is really the only argument that needs to be made. There is a reason it is rude not to look at someone in the face when they're talking to you, right? That is considered to be rude. I know this because it's hard for me. I'm not great at making eye contact with people while they're talking. I get uncomfortable. I'm an empath. I am absorbing too much information and emotion from the other human beings, so I try to protect myself by looking away. And over time, I learned people don't like that. They really don't like that. It's rude. I'm talking to you. Look me in the face. Man to man. We can't stare at each other while we talk. It's considered to be rude in Western society for a reason. Because you miss subtext when you're not looking at someone when they're speaking. You miss the subtleties of communication, right? We human beings, we don't just communicate with our words. We don't. We use body language and facial cues, and if you're reading words at the bottom of the screen the whole time you're watching a movie or TV show, you are missing all of the magnificent acting that's taking place. We are living in the golden age of entertainment. Inarguably, there has never been a period in human history that comes even close to comparing in terms of all of the movies and the TV and the quality of both and the streaming and availability and the on-demand nature of all of it. I mean, this is it. We are peaking in terms of it as we crash to a new low in most other ways. Entertainment is peaking. It was got a little, road bump there during the pandemic. Tom Cruise saved us all, though, and now it's back to peaking. And at the same time, while we are getting more high-quality, legendary status TV shows and movies than ever before, At the same time, 4 out of 5 adults 18 to 25 are not even getting it because they're reading their television shows and movies instead of watching them. What's wrong with you, Pete? What are you doing? What was the point of scientists developing 4K or 8K or whatever screen resolution we are on now, all this camera technology and high definition shit, if we're just reading words at the bottom of the screen? What are we doing? It's like if you went to a play, but rather than attempt to watch the performance taking place on stage, you chose to read the handbill the entire time. Dude, wouldn't you see a problem with that? If the person at the play you're sitting next to, it's like if you went and saw a play of like Wuthering Heights and you were sitting next to an asshole who was reading the book Wuthering Heights instead of watching the performance. Then it would be obviously an issue. Everyone in the theater, judging this person, we would all judge them the same way. But when you're at home and you've put on the subtitles because you're just fucking lazy, I get it. We don't all speak the same way. All right? I don't even have an accent. I don't know what I am. I'm some kind of weird hybrid of a whole bunch of different shit. I was in an Uber earlier and the dude accused me of being from the East Coast. He thought I was from Pennsylvania or Jersey or something. And I'm from Houston, which is the melting pot of the world. America being a melting pot, Houston being the most melting pot-ish city in the melting pot, where I was exposed to all these different cultures growing up and a whole bunch of different accents, and then I got obsessed with The Sopranos, and somehow some East Coast snuck in there. But like, I don't have an accent. I don't. I have a weird hybrid thing. I understand it's difficult to understand people that speak differently than you, though. I understand it's hard. When you're watching a show about the British and they've got their British accents and you can't tell what's what. I get it. But if you fucking practice, you will pick up on the subtleties and the facial cues and all the stuff that you're missing when you're just reading the subtitles because you couldn't give it a few minutes to let your ear catch on to the accent. You inevitably, if you're watching Downton Abbey and you can't understand shit, you get 3 or 4 episodes in, you start to understand a little more. If you're watching Scarface and you're watching Al Pacino really wrestle with that Cuban accent and attempt to be Tony Montana, eventually in the movie you get to a place where you understand him, don't you? And then you keep watching the movie, and eventually by the end of it you've really got it down pat. You could rewatch the movie and understand every fucking word that is said without subtitles, or you could just watch it from subtitles with subtitles from the get-go. Never develop any real skills or feeling for other accents, or this is the death of culture in America personified. This is it. The fact that we can't even watch the shit and make our brains go, what is that person saying? What is their mood and their emotion around it? You know how when you're texting with somebody, like your significant other, here's a great life lesson if you didn't know already. You should never carry on an important conversation with your significant other, your person that you're in a sexual relationship with, via text message. Ever. Because they are going to read into that text message in the worst possible way, with the worst possible tone, and assume all of the worst possible attitudes are attached to your message. That's what happens. You lose all the subtleties. You lose all the context. You lose all the facial cues. The same exact problem occurs here with the subtitle addiction, with the subtitle epidemic that is taking this country by storm, just like OxyContin did. In the same exact way, and it's being peddled to us because there's 3 different places I can access subtitles on my screens at this point. Whether it be the fucking TV's subtitles, or closed captioning, or the streaming service itself has its own subtitle. It's a mess. It's a mess. And here's another thing I found about subtitles that are a problem. They're not always accurate. They leave out words. Sometimes entire lines are left out. Why? There are certain shows where you get, I would argue, in one way, even more context with subtitles because they'll give you little adjectives and descriptions. Everybody likes talking about Stranger Things and how there's always chittering going on. There's always chittering happening in the subtitles. Yes, in that way, maybe you do get a little more, but you would know about the chittering if you would just fucking pay attention and listen. And again, I just to be clear, if you need them, because you're hearing impaired. Obviously, I understand. And I'm curious as to how you're getting my message right now. As far as I know, we don't subtitle this podcast, and maybe we should. Maybe this conversation ends with me coming full circle around to subtitling every episode of RBP. I don't know. It's also social media, though, from TikTok and Instagram. There's subtitles on all these videos that they're trying to shove down our throats. And that shit has screwed up the youths, and now they're right there with the olds, and we're all watching subtitles together. You're not going to see a movie if you're watching it at home and you're putting on subtitles. You're just reading a movie. You're not watching TV. You're just reading subtitles. If you've got them on and you're not paying attention. And it's sad to me, man. We're just lazy as hell. The internet and technology have made us lazier than anyone that ever came before. And it's just getting worse because you people don't, this is already an unproductive activity. I mean, it's not entirely unproductive and we all need a break, but like watching garbage TV like a lot of you do, you're already just turning your brain into mush, and then you gotta have the fucking subtitles. You can't even handle listening by yourself. You have to have somebody feed it to you, written at the bottom of the screen. It's ludicrous. Nuts. And I'll never be able to make peace with it. I'm never gonna move on from this. I know a lot of you listening are like, man, you've brought up subtitles like on 3 different episodes. I don't care. Somebody has to step up. If I can't talk about politics, God damn it, I'm going to talk about this. And if you're reading subtitles on everything, by the way, then you need this next sponsor more than most, so listen up. Today's episode is brought to you by Felix Gray Glasses. 5 years ago, Felix Gray set out to create eyewear that would improve daily screen time. And since then, Felix Gray has been on a mission to create a better relationship with technology, filtering 15 times more blue light that can make screen time tough on eyes and disruptive to sleep. I've been working on the internet for over a decade now, just over 11 years, doing this for a living, staring at screens all day, every day, and my eyes get worn out. Problem being, when I'm done with work, I like to relax by watching TV, or sports on TV, or movies, or play video games, all of which involve even more screens. So a few years ago, when I was introduced to Felix Gray, everything changed. These glasses are the quality of designer frames. It's not some cheap blue light coating that's going to chip off or scratch. That never happens. There's no chipping, no cheapness, just incredible quality designer frames that are stylish and functional as they protect your eyes from all the blue light that the screens we all rely upon emit. There is no cutting back on screen time if you're like me. It's just the most challenging thing in the world. But you can do your eyes a solid and get yourself some Felix Grays to get relief from those headaches, dry eyes, blurry vision, and what have you that occurs over the course of your workday. I've got like 6 pairs, but the Faraday, the Nash, and the West are my favorite frames. Love those 3, Faraday, Nash, West. Check them out now at felixgrayglasses.com/RBP to support the show, and you will get free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges. Non-prescription and prescription glasses are available. They've got nighttime lenses that help you wind down before bed. Check them all out. felixgrayglasses.com/RBP. That's FELIXGRAY glasses.com/RBP for free shipping, free returns, free exchanges. felixgrayglasses.com/RBP. Now, last week, on our weekly premium episode featured exclusively on patreon.com/Ross Bolen podcast for listeners who support our show directly in exchange for ad-free episodes weekly, I had a special guest, a very special guest. I would argue one of the most special guests I have ever had on this show. And I've interviewed presidential candidates. I had Brandon Renken, one of my dear friends and our de facto legal counsel here at Bolen Media, by the way. Legal counsel is spelled COUNSEL. Just thought I would make sure everyone is on the same page there. And Brandon and I recorded an over 2.5-hour episode featuring some of the best discussion I have ever been a part of. So, in an effort to convince more of you to hop on Patreon and enjoy those premium episodes every week, I am going to share a chunk of that conversation with you today. It was a lot of fun. We went heavy and hard and deep and wide on all of the really just like some of the most important things about what makes both Brandon and I who we are. It was a blast, and I wanted to make sure all of you heard at least some of it. If you enjoy it and you want the full conversation, you know where to go. But here is Brandon Renken and I discussing mind over murder, the justice system in the United States, cancel culture, and more. If the name Making a Murderer wasn't already taken, it would have been the name of this docuseries.
Sure,
but it's a very similar situation to Stephen Avery, except it's Stephen Avery on crack because there's 6 of them instead of 2. But in a similar way that like Brendan Dassey was taken advantage of because of his extremely low mental aptitude.
100%.
This is that, again, multiplied over and over. And without getting into it with like spoilers, I guess, and well, no, fuck that. We're going to talk about it with some spoilers.
I don't
here.
think you can talk about it without spoilers.
Dude, so I finished it last night. I watched the last episode, and first of all, you were right. It's extremely emotional because the story ends with this level of redemption that you don't expect. Where
for everyone.
The family of the victim is starting to open their eyes to the truth after 25 years of believing this lie.
Midway through it, you and I are having the conversation. We're both at the same point, and you and I are having a conversation. Okay, this is how it happens. This is how we get to where we're at. This is how we go fully post-fact. This is how everybody's conspiracy theories. This is how MAGA takes over, or QAnon, or
it is.
Whatever
all the same
leftist
shit.
Conspiracy you think. I'm not meaning those are just the easiest ones, right?
Absolutely.
This is how it happens. We're fucked. And by the end, I was like massively hopeful.
I didn't see that coming at all.
Me neither. I mean, we're sitting there. One of the artifices of this show. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but I'm going to use it anyways.
It plays.
One of the aspects of this show that seems nonsensical is that, look, they are addressing the facts of this murder 30 years after it happened, 35 years after it happened. And one of the reason it is being brought back to the public eye is because the local community theater is doing a play that's based on and almost exclusively written through transcripts, video depositions, testimony, statements, trial stuff, investigative records. It's all true,
facts,
direct
things that
resource materials, right?
Real quotes.
And they're going through it, and they show them developing the play the whole time. And like 90% of the show, you're like, why do we care about this?
Yeah, man.
Sure, it's interesting to get local people talking about it, but why do we care? And then the last episode comes, and you're like, that's why.
It all comes together, and they end up that piece of it. The local players' theater is the most important part of the entire story in the end.
10 million %.
Without them,
nothing would have changed,
and that place is ruined forever.
Zero would have changed,
and they got peace through. It's like the first time I've ever been like, oh my god, art really can bring people together.
Or facts, like
a combination of the two. Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's what happened. It would be as though the January 6th hearings were done in a small theater where you couldn't help but watch it, right? You were forced to pay attention because we see the contrast with Bert Searcy when they're trying to show him the documentary, and he's like, oh, fuck it. And he's like, when it gets to the hard part, he's like, and they're like, do you need us to pause? And he's like, no,
please keep it going.
Because he doesn't want to face it. He can't.
He can't. And that was the second I knew that somewhere deep down inside of him, he knew he had fucked up because he couldn't bring himself to look at the camera and watch the victims of his mistakes.
Well, and here's the deal. And here's why I think it's possible for him to be redeemed. He clearly knows, right? And that is a massively impossible thing to do. And he gets as close as you can. I mean, and he's obstinate and he's egotistical and he's a pain in the ass, but man, he gets close.
I think he still gave enough in the end in the way of not a confession, but in the way of like I realized this went horribly wrong.
100%.
And I love the documentary for mirroring Bert Searcy, who I saw as like the ultimate. I wanted to punch him in the face more than anyone because I was like, dude, it's that level of machismo, that level of like his bravado, his ego seemed to be the most toxic version of ego possible, where I was just like, I want to fucking fight you, bro.
Well, and to be clear, you were talking about mirroring.
But the mirroring was one of the members of the elderly woman, the widow who was murdered's family, who could not see his way to it, that Bert was wrong. He could not bring himself to admit that the court had found that these people who were accused of murdering his grandma were in fact completely uninvolved, to the point that even at the end of the documentary, he's going, look, I realize the facts. They've been laid out for me. My brain just isn't ready yet. I'm not there yet.
What was really interesting about that guy, and what I really liked, he's sitting on a bench, and it's about as raw as it gets. What was super, super interesting about that guy is he was admitting to the truth of the facts while at the same time making it clear to us that it was going to take him some time to be comfortable with them
and to live in that reality.
He wasn't really denying them, right?
Right.
And he even says, and this is close to a quote, he says something like, I'm certain that I am going to come to understand and believe that these people had nothing to do with this. I just can't do it yet.
I'm just not there yet.
And man, the amount of, I did not think, there's a part of me, the extremely cynical part of me, that thought that as especially Americans, we were beyond the point of that being a possibility. I thought we had gotten to the point where we don't care anymore about facts.
Right.
Like, we are totally post-fact. We really don't give a shit. It can be laid out as clearly as possible. And because of, like I said, whatever it is, our ego or our belief system or our priorities or whatever, we are incapable of admitting a truth that does not fit with our worldview, no matter what has proven it. And the fact that he was able to do that, for me, is massively hopeful.
I thought that in the end,
and the one guy who was as militant as any of them, and is the one
completely flipped,
and who brings the accused murderer into his house, and is just like, I got to tell you, man, this hasn't been easy, but this is how it is. Like, man, that guy is a hero to me personally.
He was amazing.
Yeah, and the I thought when you were talking about the mirroring, I thought you were going to go to the prosecutor.
Oh, yeah, that dude.
And I forget his last name, but one of the characters, and he's tangential because they don't get any time with him, but they call him King Richard. His name is Dick something. But he, and this is probably my most frustrating aspect of the justice system, specifically the criminal justice system, is that there is a certain breed of prosecutor at federal and state levels, and a certain breed of lawyer, period, who only cares about the end game and really does not care about justice at all.
Or truth, necessarily.
Or truth, right?
Which I think, are those the same thing for the most part?
I think that philosophers would argue with you. But I think it is the hope that justice can only be achieved through truth, right? But who knows?
Okay.
No. But
I can't find the asshole's name, but King Richard is what they call him.
Yeah, they call him King Richard. I'd almost prefer not to find his name.
That's fine.
But even up until the end, right, of this whole drama, he gets the only reason any of this happens is because he gets primaried. Somebody steps in and primaries him. And who knows if the follow-up prosecutor is better or worse or more integrous or less integrous or whatever than this guy, King Richard. But on this issue, he certainly was.
Right.
And he comes in and he looks at it and he says, there's a problem and we need to fix it, right? I think that if that had not happened, none of this would have ever happened, and those people would still be in jail.
And that's obviously a thing that okay, so maybe not necessarily with the same magnitude as the Beatrice 6, where there's 6 different people, literally none of them had anything to do with it. But there are versions of this case that have played out all over our country since its inception, probably, where, to your point, if one person is not willing, and one person that has enough power to do so is not willing to say, oh, we fucked up,
yep,
and we need to correct it, then it goes away.
Well, and
nothing is fixed.
100%. And there are examples in Austin. I'm not sure if you know about it, but you should talk about these on pods before they become before they become
True crime documentaries, yeah.
of their own, you will have been cutting edge. But I went to UT Law. There's an actual innocence project there, and two of the most famous actual innocence cases in the United States started in Austin.
Oh shit!
Yeah, and I always mix them up, but one of them's called Yogurt Shop, and one of them's called Pizza Hut, I believe. And the one that I remember the story best for, there's a murder, I believe at a Pizza Hut or a Domino's or something. It's a pizza shop. And there's a murder that happens at the pizza shop. And there's two kids who are watching the news and they're like, oh shit, I know where that pizza shop is. Let's go check it out. And they go down. And as we all know from watching all the true crime we watch, murders always return to the scene of the crime. Right? So they're milling about, this shop, whether it's the yogurt shop or the pizza shop, doesn't really matter. But they're milling about this shop. Somebody is like, hey, what are you doing here?
Get suspicious of the kids.
They get nervous because they're little kids
right.
or they're teenagers or whatever. So they immediately get taken in for questioning. And like I said, I'm not going to state any of the real facts because I forget most of them. But the sheriff at the time in Austin was an extremely authoritative, coercive interrogator. And over the course of keeping these kids awake for 8 to 12 to 15 hours, repeatedly questioning them, denying them access to their rights and, water, bathroom, whatever it took, got them to admit to the murder, right? People see admissions and they go, well, why would you? Same thing in Mind Over.
Why would you admit to something you didn't do?
Yeah. And they don't understand that in a lot of ways, the criminal justice system is set up so that, if you are one of these disposable people, as one of the characters in Mind Over Murder says, and you get put with your public defender against the full weight of the state prosecution, and they say to you, hey, if you can't prove every minute of this day, you're likely to be found guilty. Oh, and by the way, if you're found guilty, you're gonna get a life sentence. But if you plead, you'll get 5 years.
Right.
What do you do? The cost benefit analysis there is not complicated, right? And then add into that coercive tactics. I mean, shit. Go all the way back to the Blair Witch Project, right? We saw how psychologically taxing simple mental and psychological attacks can be. Imagine going through that as a 10, 12, 15-year-old for hours and being told, by the way, hey, if you just tell us the truth, you can go home. It's all over.
You butt fucked her.
Yeah, right.
Dude, you yelled at me enough times. I might start to believe it.
Yeah. And man, that story though, that Austin-based story is insane because both of those people go to jail. One of them, within his first year, is kicked in the head with a steel-toed boot, gets a mental incapacity that he never recovers from. The other one graduates from law school while he's in prison, proves that he was wrongly convicted, and gets out and is now a practicing lawyer.
Jesus.
But that doesn't help the other kid.
Right.
I mean, and jail is a real place, man. That's the other thing. And that was made clear in Mind Over Murder too. Jail is a real fucking place.
They did a very, very good job with I forget his name.
Tom Wilkins or Wilkinson.
Whatever. Look, the big dude who was bisexual that ended up being sexually assaulted in prison repeatedly.
Right.
He basically tells you a Shawshank story where you're like, oh, fuck. Except that this is a real human being. It's not a movie. And you can see in his eyes as he tells it just how broken he is by it.
100%.
And that is a very tough thing to grapple with.
And to be clear, even in the absence of that kind of abuse, which I think is not uncommon, I think we all know is not uncommon, but even in the absence of that kind of specific abuse, I mean, I've talked to my father enough about this, not in super detail because it breaks you as a person, but even in the absence of that abuse, jail's a real fucking place. And
Just the threat of it alone, that kind of abuse.
It's not a place that you emerge from the same as you went in.
And there was a quote in Mind Over Murder from the barber.
Oh my God.
That
I
dude
think
goes,
I texted you as it was coming out, and I was just like, this, and I'll let
That's
you say
the
quote.
guy.
But I heard that, and I was like,
that's the problem. This is the issue we have.
Well, and it is the epitome of the judgmental, whatever religious or self-righteous or political or economic position you are going to take, any of those factors that make you self-righteous to the extent that your life matters and no one else does, especially if they don't think like you do. Because what he says is something along the lines of, well, they were better off in jail because they live shitty lives.
Yes, he says those people probably had a better time in prison than they would have out here in the real world where they didn't contribute anything and were worthless pieces of our society.
Right.
Which is an absolutely, I mean,
it's insane.
That is such a crazy thing to say that I'm like, I honestly, like that statement should be a crime somehow. Yeah. Like he should be punished for saying that out loud.
But man, to be clear, out of all the lessons we learned from this documentary series, like him saying the quiet part out loud
is a huge one.
Huge one.
Huge one. And the prosecutor saying that Tom Wilson deserved to be raped.
Oh my God.
That he deserved to be assaulted because he committed a sex crime. And as all the defense attorneys said...
I'm so glad that the defense attorney said that and made it clear because they were 100% right. The best thing that prosecutor could have done for the defense was say that. Mm-hmm. Because even if you have someone dead to rights, the moment the jury hears the prosecution say, yeah, who cares about him? He deserved to be raped. They go, well, wait a minute.
What's happening here?
Because at the criminal, and I don't know at what stage of the process, because there was civil, there was criminal, there was everything. I think this was the civil case.
Yes.
But you think about planting doubt, and this is me thinking as a lawyer, as a strategic lawyer thinker, right? The last thing you want to do is over-argue because it sets a standard that's higher than what you actually have to prove. So the moment, and especially since she said it in closing, the moment she said, this guy deserved to be raped, what the jury starts thinking is, man, did he? They start thinking, I don't like the guy, and I think he made some mistakes, because to be clear, they all did.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
But, and I think he made some mistakes. But do I think he deserved to be raped? And if the answer to that question is no, regardless of what the jury charge says, they don't, they find in his favor.
Well, it showed that no matter what, she was making assumptions. Like she was assuming his guilt made the things that what she was upset that he got on the stand and gave genuine testimony to abuse he endured that was clearly an injustice. She was so upset that he was able to get on the stand and share that injustice that she then had to say, fuck his testimony, he deserved what he got. That's what she said out loud, basically.
And to paint it even more cynically or nefariously or insidiously than that, again, going back to the upstairs neighbors quote, he was a disposable person, so fuck him.
Yep.
Right? I mean, and man, the fact that happens, not just in big cities, not just in urban environments, not just in situations where abuse is rampant, not just anywhere, right? But everywhere in everybody's mind who thinks like that's a possibility, that you think, look, I am so right and this person is so wrong that even if we were wrong about this, they still deserved it.
Which is generally what I would describe as white America's historical attitude to black America. That same issue historically is how white people that I know are able to sort of wash their sins clean in terms of like what happens. And really it becomes more about social status than anything, and economic status than anything, even than race in some cases for some people. But I mean, most of the time you hear a story about like some horrible injustice that's occurred, and people are able to separate themselves from that with their own little set of standards and facts that they've built up in their mind about why this group of people deserves that level of treatment.
Well, and the other thing that it draws to the forefront, at least in my mind, is, we've all dealt with this fucking, onslaught of marketing about woke culture and what is woke and what is not woke, and
It's the worst word in the world now.
Well, and it doesn't mean anything, and it never really meant anything, and it's 100% marketing. The same thing as in the early '90s or late '90s, politically correct became
PC
a buzzword
culture.
that didn't even mean anything,
Yeah.
right? And it's funny because I've had conversations with my brother about the origins of instead of calling it politically correctness, let's call it self-regulation, right? I've had, and my brother and I agree about some stuff, we disagree about other stuff, but he was a very, very active debater at the University of Texas in the early 90s. And what that also meant is he was transitioning into a lot of very progressive ways of thought from being Alex P. Keaton.
Okay.
Right? He grew up a Wall Street Journal, pretty conservative debater, suits and shit, all of that. And then he was transitioning into vegan, beard, no shoes, whatever,
Yeah.
just to use.
It's what Austin does to you.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of growth there. But one of the interesting things that he told me, and if he hears this, I may be misframing this or whatever, but what I took from it was he said, look, when people started cutting vocabulary, on themselves, doing internal self-regulation, like, hey, it makes you feel bad if I say this. So, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to stop doing that, right? Me doing that as a person, as myself, as an individual, was viewed as massively conservative, right? Because it wasn't the government telling me this was right. It wasn't my boss telling me what was right or wrong. It was me saying, you know what? I value you, or I value this, or I value something. And as a result, I'm going to stop saying that. And I'm going to do it myself. I'm not going to enforce it on other people. They can do whatever they want to do, but I'm going to stop doing that, right? And I viewed that as, this is my brother talking, or I'm talking for him. I thought when we had this conversation, I misconstrued stuff he said before, so maybe. But what I took him to be saying was, I viewed that as the ultimate conservative position, because I was choosing for myself to self-regulate in reliance on nobody else's standards, requirements, laws, regulations, provisions, whatever. I thought it was right, so I was doing that. And I saw a movement of people making that decision. And then linguistic marketing took over.
And that became woke.
And that self-regulation became political correctness, which became wokeness.
Yeah.
And now, and the reason that came up in this conversation is because we are to the point where even the mere consideration of something is woke.
Yes.
So apply that to Mind Over Murder, right? What that guy was telling you in the barbershop, what he was telling you is that, man, just because you considered this, you're the other. You're too woke for me.
Yes.
Fuck them.
Yes.
I mean, and that is insane.
Yes.
To me.
No, that's the thing.
I don't care. I don't care which side of the political spectrum you're on, right? The other movement obviously was Me Too, right? Should there be instantaneous condemnation of wrongdoers, of alleged wrongdoers against women? No.
It's probably not safe.
Should we have the discussion? Yes.
Yes.
Has it been too long a period of time where we have been unable to have that discussion because the woman was always castigated and alleged to be wrong no matter what? One of my high school girlfriend had a friend, let's say, who was raped at a frat party at UT.
Okay.
Right? She was from A&M, came up for the UT A&M game, and was raped at a frat party. The rapist drove her home the following day. She asked him, man, your arms are really scratched up. What happened? He said, you did that. To my knowledge, she went to the clinic, had a rape kit done, did what she's supposed to do, and the fraternity hired national counsel and got rid of it.
Hired some badass, yeah.
And that is not a unique situation.
Right.
Right? That is shit that happened for a long time.
And
Now-
still does in some instances.
And still
yeah.
does, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. But that's
Now-
what we've been calling
now-
into light, obviously.
Now, do I think it should be flipped so that every woman is always right, or every victim is always right, and every story that, because, and that gets back to this mind over murder too, because where did this start? The mind over murder thing started at two spots. Lisa Podendorf, right? Who happens to run into somebody, Bert Searcy, who happens to be a former investigator and says, I know who did this, and blames it on a mentally incapacitated woman with a history of violence. Right? That's one place. And then poor Deb's husband, who's stuck in jail, who she's still married to and still loves and still respects and still stays with, who's stuck in jail, who says, you know what? I know other people who are involved in that. Totally makes it up out of whole cloth.
Yep.
Right? So in all of these situations, right, where there's a complex factual scenario that we need to consider and determine the outcome of, or a complex problem that we have to solve, it is important, in my mind, for us to view it as such, right? To view it as something as complex that requires analysis and not something that we're trying to pin on somebody. Bert Searcy very early on in the documentary says, you talk to somebody long enough, you can get them to say whatever you want.
Yeah. Which is true. I mean, but the issue with society on the whole, historically, in the United States that we're talking about is that certain groups of people, obviously with regard to the Me Too movement, women, but certain groups of people, pretty much anybody who wasn't a straight white Christian rich male, weren't given the same benefit of the doubt as everyone else. And that is the problem. That it doesn't matter how poor or stupid or white or black or brown you are, you're supposed to get the same benefit of the doubt in this country. That's the way that's the way we were told it worked. Now, to my knowledge, the word woke at this point essentially means that you are willing to consider
an alternative. Right, 100%.
That's the only thing it means.
Yeah.
Oh, you're willing to listen to another argument? You woke fucking loser.
100%.
You're willing to hear the other side? Fuck you. You're too woke for me.
Well, I think you're right. But to be clear, are there people who are too something for me that I can no longer call woke? For sure.
Fuck yes.
Do I think comedians should be getting canceled for stuff they say now or 50 years ago or 20 years ago or 10 years ago? In most cases, no, right? Like, do I think, and it is interesting. I listened to, it's funny, you had Jamie Kilstein on, and he was just on Jim Norton and Sam Robertson. I listen to them almost every morning. And I agree with some of the stuff they say. I disagree with some of the stuff they say. But Jim Norton has a really good take on all of this. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes I agree with it. Sometimes I disagree with it. Either way, it's good because he knows, right? He's been with all these comedians for 30 years, right? And he's been inside their minds and he understands, he seems to understand like that things change, language changes, comedy changes, and
society changes,
and all of that means something, but what it doesn't mean is condemnation for the artist, right? And the point that he makes that's really good is, why can Taika Waititi write a really, really touching performance and portray Hitler, right, in it, and it be celebrated, and a comedian tells a joke that confronts the same issue in a way, and you immediately go, that comedian believes that. It doesn't make any sense.
No, there's a great Chris D'Elia line, pre-cancellation, where he goes, you know why it's the fucking worst to go to a comedy show and get mad at something a comedian is saying? We're joking.
Yeah.
And I always love that line because I'm like, it really is like, if you pay to go to a show, or really even, it's the internet that broke that piece of comedy we're talking about was broken by the internet, because now it's not that you have to pay to go sit at the show and watch the comedian do his entire 1 hour bit. It's that you can get online and see a 30-second clip and go, I've decided he is a racist, or whatever the fuck judgment it is you want to make. And that's not even the fucking point. It just seems like we don't have to do cancel culture today, but yes, that generally is the way I feel about it too. But what really disturbs me about the woke thing is that it just seems to be you're a considerate person. That's the accusation.
Yeah.
If somebody's calling you woke, it's that you're willing to consider alternative beliefs aside from yours. It's that you're willing to hear someone out, that's not supposed to be a bad thing.
Well, and what's the most insane about it to me is that it was absolutely okay when the only group that was woke was the conservative Christian right. Right?
All right, that's all you get for free. But there is a full 2 hours more of Brandon Renken and I discussing all the most important things two human beings can discuss together on patreon.com/Ross Bolen podcast. So go today, support the show, and here's some mo. And if you refuse, well, at least support the podcast by supporting our next sponsor. Today's episode is also brought to you by Liquid IV. The hot summer months are baking us all alive, and we need to be proactive about keeping our bodies fueled and hydrated. Making hydration a priority can help us feel healthier in our everyday lives. If you're in an area where it's as hot as it is down here, my God, you know how important it is to make sure you're having enough water every day. And here's the thing. 1 stick of Liquid IV and 16 ounces of water hydrates you 2 times faster and more efficiently than water alone. Plus, Liquid IV products taste great. They've got 10 refreshing flavors like Concord Grape, Lemon Lime, Pina Colada, and Tropical Punch. Sounds like summer, doesn't it? Contains 5 essential vitamins, B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C, with 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks, made with premium ingredients, non-GMO, free from gluten, dairy, and soy. And what makes Liquid IV so effective? It's that cellular transport technology, otherwise known as CTT. It's designed to enhance rapid absorption of water and other key ingredients into the bloodstream. Also, Liquid IV is a great company. They're on a mission to change the world. They've donated over 20 million servings globally. Grab Liquid IV in bulk nationwide at Costco, or you can get 25% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use code ROSS at checkout. That's 25% off anything you order when you use promo code ROSS, Ross, at liquidiv.com to support our show and yourself. Experience better hydration today at liquidiv.com. Use promo code Ross for 25% off anything you order right there on liquidiv.com. Promo code Ross. I have an insane headline of the day. It's related to the legal system and the insanity of the world that we live in today. That Brandon and I sort of touched on in our Patreon episode last week, some of which you just listened to. Here it is. Here's the headline. Alex Jones must pay $4.1 million to Sandy Hook family after spreading lies about gun massacre, jury says. Now, most of us, I think, in America are aware of Alex Jones, right? At least and now he lives in Austin, Texas. So I'm more aware of him than I would really like to be. If you're not aware of him, he's one of these really radical, I don't even know if you would call him, I don't know if he qualifies as on the right or the left or even anywhere on the spectrum. He's off on his own in a strange reality he's created, where he comes up with insane conspiracy theories and then feeds them to his audience to the tune of millions and millions and millions of dollars. This dude's very, very wealthy. He has an enormous fan base, if you can call it that, and all these people that tune in and really, really listen to what he has to say. Now, many years ago, one of the big waves he made through the national media was when he started to claim that Sandy Hook, obviously a 2012 mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School, one of the biggest disasters, tragedies in the history of not probably only our country, but just humanity, the existence of man. He claimed that shit was a false flag and a hoax in order to, I guess, have some type of influence on the gun control argument. I'm not really sure. And I don't really want to know. But all I needed to know and all I ever knew was that this guy was a total piece of shit. And that suggesting something like, what you have to do here is imagine you lost your child in a horrid tragedy, and then some fat dickhead on the radio is saying that tragedy not only never occurred, but that you are lying and you are part of the false flag operation. And that's exactly what Alex Jones did. So a Texas jury ordered Alex Jones, founder of fringe media outlet InfoWars, to pay $4.1 million to the parents of a 6-year-old who was murdered in the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting after Mr. Jones denied that the shooting was real and accused the child's parents of participating in a government hoax. He's now facing potentially millions more in defamation damages. Now, where things get what I would say is insane, because it's all crazy enough as it is, but it's not insane that he was ordered to pay $4.1 million, right? He definitely deserved to pay $4.1 million at a freaking minimum. When it gets insane is that this dude, Jones, Alex Jones, called the decision a major victory for truth. He's claiming it as a win. Because according to him, the damages were far less than the $150 million that the couple had sought in the suit. He said, quote, "They thought they would shut us down, but that jury understood the truth and resisted the propaganda." No, that's not what they did. That's not what the jury did. It came up with a figure that they found to be acceptable to try to undo some of the horrific damage you did, sir. That's what they did. They didn't side with you. You jackass. It's not a win. It's almost like the Johnny Depp win in court. Like, you didn't win, dude. It was determined that you were also an abusive dickbag and you had to pay too. Neither of those people were winners. And in this case, nobody wins, but certainly the loser is Alex Jones. So for him to go claim after the fact this was a victory is just truly, truly pathetic. He also urged his supporters to buy more merchandise, books, and dietary supplements from his website, claiming his company needs financial support to keep operating because, quote, "we are so broke." So you can already see him probably what I would assume is working his way towards an excuse for why he can't pay these families at all. Last week, Free Speech Systems filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, revealing that InfoWars owners had taken out more than $62 million from the business. Jones and Free Speech Systems have spent more than $15 million in legal fees and costs on the Sandy Hook lawsuits alone to date, according to court documents. $15 million! They spent $15 million on court, bro. Then you gotta raise that penalty up to at least that, right? That should be a new law that they should at least propose. If rich people are allowed to throw the bag at defending themselves in court, if they lose, the bag they have to give up to whoever won should be bigger than what they spent on defending themselves at the very least. Because that doesn't seem fair. These people lost their child, then had to deal with this shit where this dude's accusing them of being part of a government hoax, and then they only get a third of what he spent defending himself? $4.1 million. I mean, $4.1 million in 2022 is like $500,000 in 1993. I mean, you know, with inflation and all this shit. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy thing to me that he could spend $15 million defending himself after spreading what I would consider to be probably the most vile and disturbing lies you can, and then only have to cough up 4.1 and then immediately start talking about how he's broke, and we get all this information about how they've taken $62 million, him and the other owners, out of InfoWars as a business. It's mind-blowing. But it's the kind of thing, like, there are elements of our society that, and I've argued this with y'all time and again, that you can't doom scroll, and you don't want to be too exposed to some of the atrocities that take place on a day-to-day basis because you'll just be miserable all the time. But then there's stuff like this, where I'm like, no, look, as a member of the media, right, and as a white dude who's in the media, at this point, I can't stand by and let dickheads like Alex Jones, because he's one of the guys, like one of the main guys, him and like Tucker Carlson and a handful of other dickheads that are totally ruining modern day media and that are continuing the issue that Brandon and I broached on the segment from last week's Patreon episode you just heard. I mean, the erasal of truth, of fact, is it's truly something. I'm in awe of it. How far we have strayed from where, like, there was a point when I was a kid where if you needed an answer to something, you looked it up, whether it was in a library or on the internet, and you got a pretty fucking good answer, and then you were taught in school. If you look something up in a book or on the internet, you can't just look it up in one book or on one website. You've got to have multiple sources, and you got to fact check those sources before you know you're right. Now, I went to journalism school at Texas State University where they furthered that idea, but this was taught to me in fucking middle school. I was like 12 years old the first time I grasped here's the concept, and it's so fucking simple. If someone tells you something, the odds that person is either incorrect or lying because of their own personal bias is through the fucking roof. So you gotta double check it. That's it. That's it. How are we not understanding that? If I say something, you can't just go, and I am registering Ross the podcaster's statement as fact in my mind, and I will move through the rest of my life without ever questioning it. That is not how any of this works. What? There are like 2 living humans who I take their word as fact when it comes out of their mouth, and one of them is my grandma. You got to check up on what people, you can't just be going off what people say, bro. That is how you end up living in an Alex Jones-esque alternate reality. And those people, they're the ones we need to ship off to the metaverse. Put all those motherfuckers in one metaverse together and let them deal with each other. Because you can't, it's like, I don't know how you combat that. I don't know what you're supposed to do if Alex Jones is allowed to get on the radio and tell all of his listeners, listen, fam, that tragedy you've been watching the news about with actual footage and interviews of all the people involved and the funerals taking place and the president visiting, that's all fake. It's a lie. It's a false flag. And then not have, I don't know, like, what do you do? And I guess you sue. You just sue. We just got to start suing everybody. There's a lot of lawsuits. Everybody needs to start suing each other. Lawyer up and file suit against everyone you know. That's, just go to court. You got to lawyer up. That's all. Look, that's why I have Brandon as close as I do at this point. The more me and him have spoken and gotten to know each other, the more I see we're on the same page for the most part. And you need a lawyer that understands you as a human being to be able to keep you safe in this day and age. Because motherfuckers will sue you for any old reason. And then the motherfuckers suing you for any old reason will be in court right next to this dickhead Alex Jones, who's being sued for every good reason that could possibly exist. And yet he will claim he's just the same as the motherfucker getting sued for no reason. And there's no real way to differentiate, is there? Is there? I don't know. It's a crazy time. It's crazy. Deshaun Watson looks about as guilty as you can possibly look, right? I don't think that dude's ever going to apologize or cop to what he did. I think he'll cough up tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars before he says he did anything wrong. Why acknowledge the truth if you don't have to? Why speak a fact about yourself if no one can make you that you don't want to share? And in his case, I don't think he wants to share. Just crazy. Look, that's all we have to talk about this day. I'm just glad Alex Jones is getting his money fucked with. And if you're listening and you're a Sandy Hook parent, please file suit. Just keep going, man. Civil court, real court, all the different kinds of courts. I don't even know them, but just sue this dude in every possible, please do something. Get him off the air. And the only way to do that's by taking away his money. It's a fucked up situation, the Alex Jones stuff. But that is our insane headline of the day that I felt I needed to discuss. And if you need a little help getting through the rest of the day because that headline is so upsetting, well, I have a sponsor for you. Today's episode is brought to you by Talkspace. When it comes to therapy and psychiatry, getting the help you need has never been so simple. When you're able to access your provider from the comfort of your device, it means therapy can be on your schedule, and alleviating the waiting times to get an appointment or the travel to an office can free up time for the rest of your life. Talkspace is so convenient and accessible. It helps me feel supported around the clock. Been in therapy for a long time. Can't more highly recommend Talkspace. I obviously understand therapy can be daunting. It's hard to get into, but getting started is way less daunting with Talkspace. They make connecting with a licensed therapist easy, so you can stop setting aside your own mental well-being. Talkspace takes some of that pressure off the first step. It's a more flexible and convenient way to get high-quality care. Plus, there are several payment options to choose from. Once you match with one of their licensed therapists, you can message them anytime through the app or schedule a live session if you need to talk something through. Talkspace is the #1 online therapy platform that has thousands of licensed therapists trained in over 40 specialties, including anxiety, depression, relationships, and more. Your therapist can help you set and achieve your goals. And as one of our listeners, you'll get $100 off your first month with Talkspace. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com. Make sure you use the code RBP to get $100 off your first month and show your support for the show. Support yourself and the show at the same time. That's code RBP at Talkspace.com for $100 off your first month. Take that first step in the direction to change your life and find happiness today. Talkspace.com, code RBP, $100 off your first month. It is August. Every August, I believe, since the first August I was doing this show, if I'm not mistaken, has been declared Call Your Grandparents Month. And as always, I'm going to spend chunks of the show each week this August explaining to you why you should call your grandparents. And just to give you a quick rehashing of why this month exists. I mentioned my grandma earlier. It's my dad's mom. One of the biggest influences in terms of a human being that I spent a lot of time with as a kid growing up that really shaped the way I look at the world and other people in it and how I treat the other people in it is in large part due to my grandma. Now, I have wonderful parents, but my mom and dad are awesome. I love them. We have our issues, but my parents are phenomenal. I got extremely lucky. But with my dad's mom, is one of the people that makes me feel luckiest in life. That I've known her. She's still kicking. She's fucking like 93 years old now. That she's my grandma and that I got to spend as much time with her as I did being the firstborn grandson on that side of the family, on both sides of the family actually, but doesn't matter. I mean, it's one of the biggest blessings I've incurred. This woman is just amazing, man. I've had her on the show before. I interviewed her on Patreon before. If you join Patreon, you can go listen to me talk to my grandma for 45 minutes right now. She's amazing, and she's one of my favorite people, period. And what I realized is as I was getting older, up into my 20s or mid-20s, late 20s, was that I wasn't finding time to connect with my family the way that I wish I was, and the way that I always assumed I would when I was an adult. Now, you know how it is. You come out of college and you're entering the adult world and you got to focus on your job and making money and figuring out your place in this whole wild rat race. And you get lost in it, right? You kind of lose yourself in this eternal struggle to make more money and have more status and get yourself a place to live and then get yourself a nicer place to live. Get a car, get a nicer car, have kids, go back to night school, level up in your career, start a side hustle. Like, it's an endless stream of to-dos for the rest of your life, which is one of the funniest things looking back. In college, I was like, I can't wait to get out of this bitch and never have homework again and fuck my life. I picked a job where you have homework forever. It doesn't stop. Content doesn't sleep. Nobody turns the internet off at 5 p.m. This is forever, bitch. And I fucked up. So, but my point is, all of us, we have to be connected to the older generation, the older generations that are still around. Regardless of how bad it has gotten with subtitles, we need the boomers. We need the boomers because they hold invaluable lessons that if we can pick up through them, we don't have to learn ourselves. And a lot of them were painful fucking lessons. I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about this on Patreon this week, but I'm a step parent already. I'm a stepdad right now, and I'm about to become a dad in February to be the hybrid stepdad dad. And one of the things that weighs on me most now is how I successfully give my children the ability to skip as many of the hardships that I've gone through is possible? What is the point if the next generation that follows me still has to go through the same stupid, look, I realize some of them are unavoidable. We all repeat some of them. But there are big picture lessons that I picked up through the course of my life that I can hand to my kids and that they can avoid as a result. That's called progress. That's called moving the ball forward, right? Like that's the game of inches of life right there. Over the course of generations, you try to build in a good direction. And that is one of the ways that my grandma really succeeded. She showed me what was important. Mostly family. She showed me what family was supposed to look like. She showed me why it was supposed to look like that and why it was important that I build myself a family similar to the one that she did, where you never, ever in your life would feel alone again, right? My grandma had I don't even know. I think I have 8 cousins, 9. We had a big-ass family. My dad had 2 brothers, all my aunts and uncles, but then all manner of cousins, and I was the oldest one. And so I got to watch all the different stages, too. Like, one of my cousins is like 15 years younger than me, man. There's a crazy age range. And just watching my grandma, how she shaped our family, how she was like, the grandma that got murdered in Mind Over Murder. How she was the central hub of that family and the family was broken as fuck after she was gone. Man, my grandma is definitely that person for me and my family. And when she's gone, which hopefully is not anytime soon, it'd be sick if she could live to be like 170, because I'm going to continue to need that advice. It's going to suck, man. It's going to be really, 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 really shitty. And for a lot of you listening who have lost a grandparent or even a parent or a loved one like that, you know what I mean. You know what I mean? There's 2 lives you live. The one before that person goes and the one after. Changes you irreparably. Grieving and mourning, man, it does something to you. Makes you you can't avoid that change that comes with it. And it makes it even harder when you look back and you see the different you that existed back when they were still around, right? Because now you got to go forward without them. And that's a very challenging thing. It's very challenging. All that is to say, that's why it's so important that you call your grandparents today. Obviously, it applies to everybody. Aunts, uncles, moms, dads. You want to call your parents and everybody that you're close to, everybody that you want a relationship with, you need to be hitting up. How do you think relationship is built and maintained? It's by conversation. It's by communication, which I just described to you as being terribly awful through text message. Don't just text each other. The fuck is wrong with you? You're not even reading it correctly. You're putting all this sass on there. It ain't even there. Somebody's just asking you how your day's doing. The next thing you know, you're telling them to suck your dick. It's like, don't text each other anymore. Fucking call. And I know it's crazy that I'm saying this because I'm the same guy who said, if you call me, I'm calling the police. If my phone rings, I think an emergency has occurred. Yeah, well, things have changed. I've changed. And now I see what's really important. And I'm joking less about this currently than I was when I said those other things. It's hard to tell sometimes. I realize that. I'll try to be clear. Right now, I'm not joking. It's important to call your grandparents. It's really important that you call your grandma, your grandpa, really any of the olds in your family, and that you connect with them. But so this August, that's what we focus on. Every August is a reminder. I mean, for some people, they do it once a week during August, call their grandma or their grandpa. For some people, it's once a day during August. For some people, it's just once. Just get that call in. Look, and if you're like, I don't really know my grandma, what the fuck am I going to talk about her? Why, my grandpa's a hard ass. Bro, it doesn't matter. That's the point. If you're scared to talk to him, it's probably because you don't understand. And if you don't understand, it's probably because you haven't talked to him enough. It's generally the way it works with human beings and our misunderstandings. A lack of communication. You're not talking to each other enough. Here's what I've found. Every phone call I've ever had with my grandma, I walk away more secure in myself, my identity, who I am as a man, who I am as a family man, who I am as a podcaster. I mean, she gives me that thing that we all wish we could give each other all the time, that confidence to be me. And she also gives me information that helps me better understand me and my family history. If there's one thing that I think Kendrick Lamar laid on thick during his most recent album, it's that trauma is generational. And if you apply that to the way really humans work it's not just that you inherit trauma. It's not just that there's generational trauma that gets handed down that you need to learn about. There's good shit in there too that maybe you haven't unlocked or maybe you don't even know about that you could discover if you would spend the time getting to know your olds. So do it. Call your grandparents, call your grandma, call your grandpa. All August long is Call Your Grandparents Month, and we'll be reminding you on social media, we'll be reminding you on the show because it is important and because it's good for you. And now if you're listening and you're like, listen, man, my grandma has been in prison for 62 years for a triple homicide back in 1945. Yeah, pick another fucking grandma. The joke I always give is like, worst case scenario, if all your olds are gone, pick somebody else's old. Call up a nursing home and tell them to connect you with Kathy. There's definitely one in there. Have a talk with Kathy. Ask her some things about back in the day. Boom, you have fulfilled your legal obligation for Call Your Grandparents Month, which again is all August long. I'll be tweeting it out at Ross Bolen Pod on Twitter, at the Ross Bolen Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. Follow us everywhere. You get great clips of the show, fun little entertaining pictures and photos from fans and memes and whatnot as well. We try to share as much good content as we can on social. TikTok at the Ross Bolen Podcast, Instagram at the Ross Bolen Podcast, Twitter at Ross Bolen Pod. I'm Ross Bolen. Follow me at WR Bolen on Twitter and Instagram. Jared isn't here with me this week. He'll be back not next week, the week after that, at Jared Borislow on Twitter and Instagram as well. Show your love for J-Bone and listen to his F1 podcast. If you're an F1 fan, Formula Bone F1 show is available wherever you listen to RBP. He's got a race recap from the most recent one. I think it was the Hungarian Grand Prix. I can't remember. I'm not an F1 guy like y'all. But if you love F1, Formula Bone F1 show available wherever you listen to RBP. It's biggest on YouTube. He's got like 60,000 subscribers on YouTube now. Jared does for Formula Bone. Just look up Formula Bone on YouTube. It'll be right there. Watch that shit. I will be back with a Patreon episode for this week on patreon.com/Ross Bolen podcast shortly. This one's just going to be me. And I've written more for that episode than I've written for anything in a long time. I'm excited to record it. I'm actually doing it right after this. So just a reminder, you are missing half of the episodes each week. During the summer right now, things are slower. All right, and we're on the verge of recession. We don't have the same level of sponsors as we usually do, which is why it's so important that you support our sponsors. If you're wondering, that's why we only have one ad-based episode a week right now, and the other one is on Patreon, because it's just kind of the nature of the business, and we have a lot of other shows going here at Bolen Media between my Houston Sports podcast, Banging the Can, our Westworld podcast, Freeze All Motor Functions, Jared's F1 show, Formula Bone F1 show, and then, of course, Oysters, Clams, and Cockles. We've been covering The Sopranos, and we've got House of the Dragon coming up. There's been a lot going on. So it's important that you support our sponsors that are existing right now, felixgrayglasses.com/RBP to get free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges. liquidiv.com, code Ross for 25% off anything you order. Code Ross at liquidiv.com. And then, of course, Talkspace.com, code RBP for $100 off your first month of therapy. Very important that you support our sponsors. Very important that as many of you as possible get on patreon.com/Ross Bolen podcast. Look, I'm trying to take this shit to a whole nother level next year. Jared has done his part. He has massively succeeded in launching his own brand and something he's focused on and passionate about with F1 and with Formula Bone. That's awesome. Now we got to go next level. We got to find the next step. And a lot of that is going to be determined by how much support, how quickly we can do that, rather, is going to be determined by how much support we get from you, our listenership. So we're very thankful to each and every one of you who can support our sponsors, use those codes. It goes a very long way. That's why they come back, because they see that you like them and that we like them, and we all win together, and they sponsor the show, and you buy the products, and I try to bring you only good sponsors, the best of the best. This is good shit. This is all stuff that I use in my real life. Talkspace, Liquid IV, and Felix Gray pretty much every day. So get in there. Support the sponsors. Get on patreon.com/Ross Bolen podcast so that you can hear each of the 2 episodes that come out every week. One is right here on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, etc. It's free and available to everybody with advertisements in it. And the other is premium, ad-free, all new exclusive shit on patreon.com/Ross Bolen podcast, which again is where the entire interview, 30 minutes of which I shared with you during today's episode with Brandon Renken, lives and exists. So if you want to hear the other 2 hours, that was like a chunk from like the middle of the thing. If you want to hear the beginning and the end, 2 more hours of content with Brandon Renken right there on patreon.com/Ross Bolen podcast, and another new episode for this week. So get on there, support the show. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for being here today. Until next time, peace be with you and also with you.
The Ross Bolen Podcast.